If not, do we have any opponents?
My name's Darrell Eastland, 1005 Fayette Drive. I've been digging through the budget. Every once in a while, I come up with a common phrase that's been used lately. We have to pass it in order to see what's in it. I think that was Speaker of the House some years ago on a particular bill. But here we have the budget. I'm looking at, I'll first start at page 116. I don't know if you have that up there. But it's basically is the consolidated statement of budget revenues and expenditures. And on the left column, it has FY 12-13 revised budget. So the first thing I raised was what was revised on the FY 12-13 budget from what you approved last year. Just the nomenclature there kind of indicates that it was revised. So I tried to do online search again, and I came up with, I couldn't do it. I mean, it didn't find what I was looking for on what was revised about that FY 12-13 budget. Those numbers we're using into this year's budget, so that's kind of critical. What was revised?
Mr. Easton, the only revision that was made to that was the bond refunding that the council approved in the previous year. And so anytime we refund the bonds, then we have to revise the budget to account for the refunding.
Well, that's interesting, because I went back the year prior and looked at the budget that was proposed, and the numbers are identical. It doesn't show any revision, the way I see it. Now maybe I didn't go through every number, but when I look at the full print numbers between the 2 years, 85, 157, 740, 93, 197, 478. And then on the next, going down into the expenses, it's all the same. So I was kind of saying, well, what's revised about it?
In the ordinance that's being before the council tonight, they're being asked to approve that revision for that bond refunding. That is the only revision that we are asking for. That is reflected in the estimated column that you will see under the payment of refunded bonds. It's not in that column yet, I don't believe, because
I see bond proceeds down there.
Yes, sir. Because obviously we would not have known at the time that we adopted the budget last year that we would have had a bond refunding opportunity. But Janine, correct me if I'm wrong, there's no other change to the budget.
Well, okay. Well, I was just wondering, because the numbers just lined up so perfectly that I didn't think there was if it's revised here, and it's the same numbers as before, but that's my point. Then the consolidated statement, there's the consolidated statement, and then there's the combined summary statement, and the numbers aren't easy to track from one sheet to the other. And one terminology used on many of the budgets was selective sales tax. Now they got general sales tax, understand what that is. Now selective sales tax is that the EDC and combined with the CCPD amount and the tax relief portion of sales tax, or what is that?
Selective tax is referred to as the car rental tax and the hotel motel tax combined together.
Okay. Well, it doesn't give a nomenclature explanation in there, because I searched the entire budget for selective tax, sales tax, and some of these things are handy if somebody is reviewing the budget to look at it. Now, the other item about the budget that I disapprove of is the bottom line down here in the proposed FY 13-14 budget has a $5 million under, where our expenses are $5 million over our revenue. Now, do we make that up with reserves? Are we doing the bond issues? And are they explained in the budget somewhere?
Our budgets are balanced other than capital expenditures, and we can use excess fund balance to pay for capital. So our operating budgets are always balanced, but we, rather than issue debt, will use any excess fund balance to pay for capital.
Yeah, I noticed that, the prior year you had proposed, revised, or whatever it is, a $4,600,000 loss, and now you're estimating a $1.6 million profit, I guess, or gain. The other issue I have on how confident can I be in the actual budgets that you put on the combined summary of revenues and expenditures. I mentioned this once during the town hall meeting, that let me just hand these out here. These are in the printed, published budgets, and when you have double books, and when you have two sets of actual numbers for a given fiscal year, I kind of wonder what's, now the one I talked about earlier, sorry, you're going to have to share them if you want to, because I know we're finding so many copies. But the actual numbers I referred to, just to give you, the ones that are stapled together is, if you look at that, it's stapled together. The numbers for actual fiscal year 07-08 on one sheet is different than the actual numbers for fiscal year 07-08 on the other sheet. Now they're 1 year apart, these budgets, okay? And if you look at it, that's $1.5 million difference. So how can you publish something as an actual number, and then the following year you publish the exact same budget as an actual, without some sort of caveat on it that says this was revised due to an audit, or this was revised due to something else? It tends to make me believe that, we got a double set of books maybe. I'm not going to go that far. And then the one that comes out, it's folded up like that, and the other long sheet has the actual numbers for 2009, 2010. Now this is a smaller error, but they're in our approved budgets that are online, and there's no caveat that I can find where there was a justification for changing. Now, this one was much less, about $46,000 or something. But all these numbers carry forward because, like your checkbook balance or anything else, you make a mistake 5 years ago, it's going to carry through until you notice it right now. So all of these numbers, and I don't know which number actually carries through. So I'd like some clarification on that.
Is this the same issue you've raised? Did we not
I
already
raised the issue on the,
Mr. McCamey, if I can respond to that, I have not gone back to 2007 to investigate the one that he brought forward tonight, but we did look into the other one. There was a very small capital fund that the city no longer used that was clearly omitted from one of the numbers, and it was a few $1,000s. It was a capital fund that had a few $1,000s in the beginning balance. It was omitted. We explained to Mr. Easton that was simply an error. In one of the years, that fund was omitted. It was a small capital fund that was no longer active, and there was a small balance remaining in it. I'll be happy to look at this.
I can understand mistakes once in a while, but we have 7 people up here, elected officials, reviewing these budgets from 1 year to the next. And, I found that one I talked about just by looking back one year. When you look this year, didn't you look back to see what the actual numbers for last year was or the previous year? That's where my issue is coming from, is that my elected officials have looked at these budgets, whether it be in Kaufman, Texas, or here in Star out here, and they get it prior, they ought to be looking at it. And now the $1.5 million back in those years, that's quite a sum of money. It was $46,000, I think, in the one I just mentioned about. So those are two examples of where I don't have confidence in the numbers that are presented to me in the current budget. You got actuals here, and they carry over the next year. So that's about all I've got. On the capital budget, I'm looking at, there's one item in there that's $10 million. DR0000. It's been carried for about 5 years. It's funded at $10 million, and out at the caveat on the side, it said the bonds have not been issued. So are we expecting a $10 million bond issue soon for that capital improvement item? Or is that just going to be carried over for another 2 or 3 years?
Mr. Easton, you're surprising me here tonight. You sat through and heard these explanations before. Number one, we owe you an explanation for the fiscal year 07-08. You laid papers in front of us that go back 5 years. I can't offer you an explanation right now, but what I do believe in is we owe you an explanation, and we'll get you one, but I don't think you can expect someone to be able to go back 5 years and give you an explanation immediately. So,
Well, you know, the error.
Hang on, let me finish. I listened patiently to you. We will get you an explanation. Most importantly, we'll get these 7 people up here an explanation of what that is, but we can't explain something that happened 5 years ago. On your DR, whatever that number was, the $10 million drainage project, we've addressed that repeatedly. That is a drainage project that was identified several years ago. There is not one drop of funding in this budget or in last year's budget for that. We believe that that will be provided at some point in time by property owners and developers. That is a future project that is out there, and if someone brings forward a plan to address some of that drainage and they need some assistance, or there's something that the city needs to do, then we'll bring forth a plan right now. I mean, at that time. But right now, it is just a project that is sitting there that there's an estimated value of $10 million. But there is not one dime of city money that has gone into that or that is budgeted to go into it this year. If at some point in time, we may have to do something, but it's not this year. And you've heard that explanation several times, so I'm not sure. I'm not sure what the point is, but that's the explanation. Whether you have any confidence in that, I can't give you confidence. We used to have an attorney that said I can explain something for you, I can't understand it for you. But that is the explanation for it, and there's not one dime dedicated to this project this year.
But it's an approved project. If it's in the, is it not, if it's in the capital improvements thing, it's an approved project?
There is no funds allocated towards it.
It's just been,
It's been approved. In fact, as you look through these previous years that you've given
well,
us,
that's why I'm wondering why we
it's
keep
been in
carrying
there
this.
for several years.
Why do we keep carrying something that doesn't materialize?
Well, I mean, that's kind of like other things that you may raise. It's one can disagree with something, it does not make it questionable, or whatever word you use while I go up for our books. I mean, there's nothing questionable about it. It's all, I think that the word that you use is transparent. It's on the internet. It is all, every bit of it is available for you to review.
The explanation
So
of
the
why.
cows come home, but you may not agree with it.
Well, the explanation of why there's 2 different actual numbers for, whatever those years
Well,
were.
that's what we're going to get back to you with, and the city
there's,
council.
there's no explanation for it, and I would have thought that this was pretty easy for me to find. Now, all I had to do is, cross-reference a few budgets. And I sat through the budget for this year, nobody brought those issues up. I brought it up at the town hall, but that didn't encourage anybody to look at it. I just lose confidence in people that are approving a budget with these kind of errors. That's all. Thank you.
Do we have any other objections to this public hearing? If not, I'll close the public hearing, and we'll go to item number 13, where we consider the first and final reading of ordinance number 2002, adopting the City of Euless official operating and capital budgets for the year 2013-2014. What is your pleasure, council?
Mayor, I move approval.
I will second.
Thank you. The motion is made by Councilperson Martin and seconded by Councilperson Bynum to approve ordinance number 2002. Are there any further questions or statements? Mr. Stenner.
Mayor, I have a comment. I think that there's a misconception by Mr. Easton as far as what a city council's responsibility is in relationship to the budget. if you want to look at it as, if I had a plane that I owned, well, I'd make sure that the captain of my plane had the funds and had the equipment he needed to land that plane. But I'm not going to go up there and tell him I want 20 degrees flat to land it, because I think he knows that better than I do. Our responsibility as a council is to make sure that our citizens have the amenities they need at a price they can afford. I don't know if we need 17 parks employees. I bet Ray McDonald does. I have no idea. I volunteer with the police and the fire, but I don't know how many policemen we need, and I don't know how many firemen we need. But Wes and Mike do. Our job is to make sure that we have the right people in the right place, doing the right things, at a price that our citizens can afford, doing the things our citizens want, and a balanced budget. And I'm very proud of our staff, I'm very proud of our council, and I have ultimate confidence in the integrity of the people up here and the people out there. I'm disappointed that Mr. Easton does not, but that's his problem, it is not mine. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Steniford. Do we have any other comments to be made? If not, item number 13 on the agenda has, the motion has been made and seconded. It's time for you to cast your votes. The city budget has been approved.